And we move on to page 27, chapter Spontaneous Cases of the Projection of the Astral Body, Sylvan, Muldoon, and Hereward, Carrington. As before mentioned, there are two types of varieties of astral projection, the spontaneous and the experimental. In the former, the individual undergoing the experience merely finds himself projected without knowing how or why. He finds himself outside his own physical body, which he can clearly see, but how he got there he does not know. In the latter, the experiment makes a determined and voluntary effort to project, usually to some definite locality, and wakes up to find himself there or en route. Of course, the vast majority of such attempts end in failure. Successes are extremely rare, or the subject may be seen by some individual at the locality in question and remain quite unconscious of its apparent success. Examples of all types of varieties of projection are to be found in this book, together with an analysis of the modus operandi evolved, and an explanation of the success or failure, as the case may be. Let us consider first of all a few typical cases of spontaneous projection. As before stated, this may occur theoretically when the subject is asleep, in trance while under the influence of anesthetic, or it may occur when the subject is awake and conscious, but merely relaxed, at least at the beginning of the experience. A good illustration of this may be found in a recently published book entitled My Travels in the Spirit World by Caroline D. Larson, where we read, "Suddenly, I underwent a very strange experience. A feeling of deep oppression and an apprehension came over me, not unlike which precedes a fainting spell. I braced myself against it, but to no avail. The overpowering oppression deepened, and soon numbness crept over me until every muscle became paralyzed. In this condition I remained for some time. My mind, however, was still working as clearly as ever. First I heard the music downstairs plainly, but soon the sounds began to slip away from me by degrees until finally everything became a blank, and I was unconscious to life and the world. How long this state lasted I do not know. What happened during this period I am also unable to relate. The next thing I knew was that I, myself, was standing on the floor beside my bed, looking down attentively at my own physical body lying in it. I recognized every line of that familiar face, pale and as still as in death, the eyes tightly closed and the mouth partly open. I turned and walked slowly towards the door, passed through it and into a hall that led to the bathroom. Through force of habit, I went through the motions of turning on the electric light, which, of course, I did not actually turn on, but there was no need for illumination, for from my body and face emanated a strong whitish light that lit up the room brilliantly. In the case published by Dr. I. K. Funk in his Psychic Riddle, the writer describes how he lost control of his body by reason of a cold numbness which spread over it on a number of occasions before having his first conscious projection. On the occasion in question, after these preliminary symptoms, he first of all became momentarily unconscious. There came flashings of lights in his eyes and ringing in the ears, and it seemed for an instant as though I had become unconscious. When I came out of this state, I seemed to be walking in the air. No words can describe the exhilaration and freedom that I experienced. No words can describe the clearness of mental vision, and no time in my life had led my mind to be so clear or so free. I became conscious of being in a room and looking down on a body propped up in bed, which I recognized as my own. I can I cannot tell what strange feelings came over me. This body, to all intents and purposes, looked to be dead. There was no indication of life about it, and yet here I was, apart from my body, with my mind thoroughly clear and alert, and the consciousness of another body to watch, which matter of any kind offered no resistance. After what might have been a minute or two, looking at the body, I began to try and control it, and in a very short time all sense of separation from the physical body ceased, and I was only conscious of a directed effort towards its use. After what seemed to be quite a long time, I was able to move, got up from bed and dressed myself, and went down to breakfast. As to the criticism invariably advanced, this was a mere vivid dream, the writer says. I know that many people may think that the statements recorded here are simply the result of an active imagination, or perhaps a dream, but they are neither the one nor the other. If the whole world were to rise up, it would not make one particle of difference in my mind, as I am absolutely certain that I have been as free from my physical body as I will ever be, and that my life apart from it was far more wonderful than any life I have ever experienced within it. The case of Dr. Wilts is very well known. It was first printed in St. Louis Medical and Surgical Journal, November 1889, and afterwards in Volume 8 of the SBR Proceedings. It was also published, in part, in Human Personality, Volume 2. In view of this, only a few brief extracts from this most interesting case will be given, referring the reader to the above sources for the full account. After a few preliminary remarks and descriptions, Dr. Wilts goes on to say, "With all the interest of a physician, I beheld the wonders of my bodily anatomy, intimately interwoven, with which even tissue for tissue was I, the living soul of that dead body. I watched the interesting process of the separation of soul and body. By some power, apparently not my own, the ego was rocked to and fro, laterally, as a cradle is rocked, by which process its connection with the tissues or the body was broken up. After a little time, the latter motion ceased, and along the soles of the feet, beginning at the toes, pausing rapidly to the heels, I felt and heard, as it seemed, the snapping of innumerable small cords. That when this was accomplished, I began slowly to retreat from the feet towards the head, as a rubber cord shortens. As I emerged from the head, I floated up and down and laterally, like a soap bubble attached to the bowl of a pipe, until I was at last broke loose from the body, and I fell lightly to the floor, where I slowly rose and expanded into the full structure of a man. I seemed to be translucent, of a bluish cast, and perfectly naked. I directed my gaze to the bed, and saw my own dead body. It was lying just as I had taken so much pains to place it, partially, upon the right side, the feet close together, and the hands clasped across the breast. I was surprised at the paleness of the face. I turned and passed out the open door." Dr. Wilts then relates a number of mental experiences which he had during his extended trip, including the perception of certain things which he did not know existed, but which were subsequently verified and correct. And, at the conclusion of his astral journey, he was suddenly arrested by what appeared to be a dense black cloud. A small, densely black cloud appeared in front of me and advanced towards my face. I knew that I was to be stopped. I felt the power to move over and to think leaving me. My hands fell powerless to my sides, and my shoulders and head dropped forward. The cloud touched my face, and I knew no more. When he regained consciousness, he was in his own physical body. The case of Reverend L.J. Bertrand, also given in Proceedings, Volume 8, thus summarized by Mr. Myers. During a dangerous ascent of the Titlis, Mr. Bertrand, separated from his companions, sat down to rest and became paralyzed by the cold. His head, however, remained clear, and he experienced the sensation described by Dr. Wilts of passing out of his body and remained attached to it, a kind of elastic string. While in his condition, he had clairvoyant impressions about his absent companions, and much astonished them out on their return by describing their doings to them. Thank you.